just to be back here. Should be analysis procedures. Open you up. And you're muted. You have to be muted.
What a setup. We got a week crammed into half a week and then some. The other way around. A week and then some crammed into half a week. Wow, y'all feel like I feel. Is that right? Yeah, Michaela does. Good morning. Cool. It's at the time 11:30. Out board. Oh, you're quicker than that. Hey, good morning. It's 11:30. Let's learn something, shall we? How we feel right now? Pretty tired. Pretty exhausted. Ready for Thanksgiving break? Is that where we are? No? Yeah?
Yeah.
Maybe? Yeah. So today is a pretty technical day. I do have a bunch of announcements, a bunch of stuff, a bunch of news that I know you're ready for, and a bunch of other stuff hanging out around here. I'll just get started. So first of all, today I'm documenting and archiving today's class. What I'm capturing is what's on the screen and the audio from the class using my beat up setup with Google Hangouts and YouTube and whatnot. So the reason I'm doing that is that today is a very technical class to demo some SPSS stuff based on some data I simulated from one of the teams in this class who was kind enough to let me play with their survey to generate some data from it. That way we can take a look at it and start to answer some questions. Also available, based on the groups, nobody in here, the folks I met with on Sunday, we did a bit of that too. So there's a couple new modules in SPSS. There is a module called Analysis Procedures here, and the Analysis Procedures tab now has the video from Sunday. Now this video, I don't have the audio playing on it because otherwise my setup would give us a bunch of feedback, but does exactly the same thing that we're going to do today, which is take a look at some data, answer some questions, set up some SPSS syntax somewhere in here. There's a bunch of pivot tables we did too, but some SPSS syntax, which will step you through exactly the types of tests that you're going to be doing for your projects and for the SPSS assignment that I'm going to introduce today as well. The reason I'm capturing all of this is that if you haven't been exposed to this, and it can be hard to capture a bunch of notes if someone's demoing something to you, especially if you're not able to because you don't have the SPS software on your machines right now. If you can't play along at home, it can be hard sometimes to keep up. So I want you to have the opportunity to engage, ask questions. If you look at something that gets written for syntax, what gets executed, if there's pieces along the way that you think align with how you might want to be doing your analyses, stop me, we'll unpack it, and then you can always come back to whatever gets captured. Like I said, we'll capture the audio, so we'll get questions, we'll get explanations, we'll get the stuff that gets written on the screen, and so on. So that's the whole reason for the technical setup today, is so that you have access to today's class afterwards, especially when we don't have that many opportunities to have exposure. You'll have this in the future. So that's why and how we're going to be capturing today. If you haven't been made aware of the Analysis Procedures web module, it's available on the web as a module. Here we are. And for this group, this is the group that's working on the benefit juice bar. Well, there are two groups were there. They do a lot of group comparisons. So as you may have seen briefly flash on the screen, t-tests. So if you're doing group comparisons in your study, you want to compare one group to another group, one strategy you might use is independent samples t-test. We did a bunch of those. We talked about a bunch of different ways to do that. Excuse me, I also think we did some ANOVAs. We did some correlations. We did a lot of different comparisons with some data that they had coded. So that's one resource that's already available to you. It is, like I said, here. The data that we're going to use today is also available in the analysis procedures module, 1130 simdata2.sav. This is what I put together last night. Now, the simulated data is random. So let's not draw any conclusions based on anything here, first of all. So you know that about this data. Second of all, I didn't try to generate anything in here that would lend itself to here's something that we might see. Though I did play with the data after I simulated it last night, and there's a couple of things that I want to direct us towards that I think will be useful as far as our SPSS assignment goes. Once this video is captured on YouTube, I will post it in the analysis procedures module here. And I'm going to do this for the other two classes as well. That way you'll have all the stuff that we do today. I'll capture and save the syntax that we put together. I'll put everything that we do from all of today's classes in here. So you'll have access to this to use as templates, to use as guidelines for the assignment that I'm about to introduce. Assignment, the SPSS assignment is here. It's a document file. Word. Now, I've largely borrowed this based on what Scott Wright has told me works well to introduce this to you. It's a very, very, very simplified version of the types of things that you might be doing with your particular studies. In fact, if we look at the data is already in Excel, and the data itself has only 6 variables, 7 if you count respondent ID. But all of the variables are only provided as numbers. The codes for those numbers are provided. This assignment is due Friday, December 1st. I believe that's a Friday. No, I think that's right. December 1st at 5. It basically describes a couple of different variables regarding Super Bowl commercials. So attitudes toward Super Bowl commercials, I think they were great. I really liked them. I did not enjoy them. Those are 3 attitude metrics, and they're put here as attitude. Where did you watch the Super Bowl? At a bar, at a party, at home? How important is football to you on a 1 to 7 scale, where 1 is unimportant and 7 is important? So there's 6 questions in here. There's also something which captures gender. Gender is coded 1 male, 0 female. There's instructions on how to submit. Mostly what I'm looking for here is what we'll be generating today, which is a syntax file. I want as much as you can provide me in the syntax file, because that allows you to show me what command you're trying to execute. And you can also include comments which tell me what analysis you're trying to execute, why you're trying to execute it. If there's something I need you to describe to me, for example, there's 10 tasks, is please write the level of measurement for all 6 variables. Step 2 is to import this into SPSS. I have a couple hints in here about how you'll be getting to what you need to do in order to execute these commands. For example, if you want to calculate means, if you want to create a histogram, if you want to create a 1 sample t-test, If you want to do another t-test, that would be an independent samples t-test. If you want to create correlations, if you want to create a one-way ANOVA, if you want to create a linear regression, there's a couple of hints in here. And there's 10 parts, and they're all weighted equally, and they do, I think, increase in difficulty as you go forward. These assignments are to be done in groups of 3 to 4, no fewer than 3, please. The more groups that there are, the longer it takes to do the grading and whatnot. So in order to help improve my efficiency, topic of conversation, that's something that I'm asking for you there. So this is the assignment. You've got a couple of weeks to do it. I'll be available early next week if anybody's interested in being around. We got no class on Tuesday, by the way, no class Tuesday. But if you're around, you want to work on it or anything like that, just let me know. We'll set up a meeting. Also, after Thanksgiving break, I'll have much more white space available in my calendar, and we can meet. We can talk about your projects. We can talk about this assignment. This assignment is pretty straightforward if you follow the steps and you've got a little bit of familiarity. But I realize you don't have much familiarity, so it's going to be tough introducing yourself to something new. But it is a pretty simple data set, and the tasks that you're being asked to do are fundamental. But I think if you use SPSS again in the future, which some of you might, these fundamental tasks are going to help you in the things you want to do going forward. So this is the SPSS assignment. Again, it's to be done in groups. There's submission instructions and everything available here. And all of this is available in the SPSS assignment module. Questions, comments, concerns, thoughts on those two things? Okay. So your projects and your midterms, I planned on having them done today, and unfortunately I was bum rushed by the illness. So I'm really, really sorry about that. I'm about halfway through grading. I'm going to grade the rest of them tomorrow. If you want to get those before Friday, stop by my office after 3 o'clock, and I'll make sure I have yours graded. Let me sit down and talk about it if you want to do that. Outside of that, when they're all done, I'll be emailing everybody the feedback that I have for those projects using a cute little mail merge technique, which is also going to be pretty useful for us for our class projects. So I will be emailing everybody the feedback and their grades for those things tomorrow. Not tomorrow, Saturday, but gosh darn it, Jeff, get it done tomorrow. So speaking of cool little mail merge, this morning I was able to submit all 7 of our studies as requested by Todd at the IRB for hopefully quick 24-hour exemption approval, which means that you can launch using the sampling procedures which you outlined in your midterm assignments, as well as your project proposals. However, I discovered that there are other sections of 434, which I do not teach, that are also in need of data collection. So I reached out to Ainsley Schultz, she's another marketing professor, and said, hey, I heard you need some sample. And she's like, yeah. And I was like, she's like, what do you suggest? Can we partner? Can we team up? And I said, yeah. So her links, her project links are all going to be ready on Monday. All of our project links are ready now. When she gives me her project links and the email addresses of her students, I will also, if you're willing, include our sampling frame, our list of students, along with, and I'm thinking, based on the math, if we all do 3 and they all do 3, we're able to get, although it is a convenient sample of fellow marketing 434 students, we will all be able to get a legitimate sample size. Now, we still will have to be concerned about the generalizability of our sample based on the fact that there are seniors, they are marketing 434 students, they're all people who might have some familiarity with you, with the projects, and so on. However, it would be actual sample which we can access pretty conveniently and it would guarantee us some sufficient sample size. If anybody wants to opt out of this opportunity, please contact me, and I will not include you in that frame. But otherwise, I will be combining their survey links, our survey links, our email addresses, their email addresses to create a sampling frame and distribute some survey links for them and you to participate in so we can collect some sample right quick. I figured that's something I can do to help you out, help you collect some sample. I know we want to post some links to Facebook, but I already know that some people in Scott's class reached out to me and said, hey, can you share our links with your class because we're having trouble collecting sample from Facebook? I said, well, if you're having trouble, then we might have trouble, so we need to find an alternate solution. So this is my alternate solution. I hope that helps out. Those are going to come out via email or hit me up after 3 o'clock tomorrow. I think I'll probably be around until I think about 5:30 or 6 on Friday. SPSS projects are available now. Take a look at them sooner rather than later to see what you need to do. I'll get back to you when the IRB gets back to us. Though this recruitment via the other class will likely be done on Monday or Tuesday, so we can get those links out as soon as possible. And outside of that, it's time to dive into some SPSS stuff. So those are the opening remarks. Any questions, comments, concerns, or thoughts, or anything you got right now?
So to clarify, are we good to go to distribute?
Hang on for the
Did you submit it this morning?
say again?
So it was submitted this morning?
Submitted it this morning. Yep. No questions?
Recommend that we don't post on Facebook at all.
Just not yet.
Okay.
Feel free to post on Facebook. All I know is that some students reached out to me, former students from Stats, and said, hey, can you help out? And then I reached out to him. I saw Curry reached out to me, and I reached out to him yesterday. I saw him, and he was like, no, we're all set. So I don't know how he accomplished his goal, but having heard back from Ainsley, then I was like, all right, well, this is another opportunity for us. So that's my understanding right now, but I'm not sure which Facebook groups he may or may not have reached out to. I know that some people in their proposals said they wanted to use GroupMe or campus group chats or things like that. So if there's other vehicles that you have that you want to use to collect your convenience samples, I outlined all of those in the IRB proposal I sent today based on what I read through in your proposals and your midterms and whatnot. So hopefully all that's kosher with them as well.
What would you consider to be the point of really, oh, okay, that looks good.
Yeah. Typically like 100. I'm not setting a mandate at that. But I figure if enough people take our survey across our sections and other sections, and we can collect some convenient sample otherwise. It also depends on what you're trying to compare and what you're trying to generalize to. So if any of your hypotheses have to do with, let's say, comparing class of 2018 to 2021 or 2020 or things like that, those types of comparisons would require quotas for those subgroups. Presumably at least 30 for each of those subgroups. For subgroups, meaning you want like 120, 30 in each. But for the most part, it's what you can get. And as long as you're not trying to generalize anything except relationships, meaning if you collect a convenience sample and then try to tell me that 80% of Providence College students are seniors because 80% of your sample was seniors, that's not generalizing a relationship. That's just generalizing population parameters from your statistics, and that's wrong. However, if we have a group of seniors and a group of sophomores and we compare those two groups, that's trying to generalize a comparison. Or if you correlate or whatever, you're generalizing a relationship. Those things are, they have much more what we call ecological validity or just, generalizability based on convenient samples.
Just generally, are we still having final exam last week?
Yes,
Okay, and that's on Thursday.
that will be the last day of class, yes. And there will be written portions for that.
Yeah.
There will be prep for that.
So it'll be like mostly textbook based or more of like in class, what we've been working
It's going to focus more on the stuff we've been doing in class. Again, things about sampling procedures.
Yeah.
Things about things about reliability, validity. It may be a little replay of some of the stuff that we saw on that way back when we had that multiple choice quiz back in the day. But I need to do a better job of guiding you and directing you into exactly the types of questions that we're going to be asking. Basically, the way this course, I mean, I wasn't trying to control the river. I wanted to see where it would take us. And as you've generated these projects, come up with your questions, and demonstrated to me where your strengths are, I wanted to make sure that we kept the course suited to those things, rather than try to say I'm going to demand, like, funnel this information into your brain, which is a mistake I think I made early on. But I want to make sure that it's consistent with what we've been doing in here, and then it's an extension of that, rather than here's something completely separate, knowledge that you need to memorize and have captured in your brain. I guess there's something to be said for that, but whatever context you go into, they're going to have their own vocabulary. They're going to have their own set of guidelines, the proprietary tools and metrics and those things that they're going to expect you to learn. And I'd rather have our exams be representative of what we've learned, we as us, for better or for worse. What are they going to do, fire me? What else you got? So I'm gonna take a minute. I brought my own hardware today because I'm not gonna get frustrated with the hardware provided by the school in order to execute what we're looking at here. So this survey, and I will share this survey in the chat link in Sakai if you're interested. So chat room. Now the Google Hangout is actually the Hangout that we have right now. You want to give me a hyperlink? All right. So you may be responsible to copy and paste that rather than click a hyperlink. Doesn't like to see that as a hyperlink. For the study that we're going to look at here. Now this study begins with the information sheet, gives us some description and so on. Who to contact, once the IRB gives us a thumbs up. First question. That helps a little bit, right? And I think provided you've got your sound on mute, so we don't get massive feedback, I think if you click into this Hangout, you can actually see what's being captured on the screen. Are you an undergraduate student at Providence College? Please indicate the offices that you have used. So we've got OAS, Dean's Office, CCEPD, Campus Ministry. Over the 16-week semester, how many total hours do you spend with the following offices? Please select the following social media platforms that you follow for OAS. Depending on what you select from this list, you'll be piped into only those things which you select to provide how often do you check those social media platforms, which do you follow for CCEPD, and then you'll only be asked about those and how often you check them. Where do you currently find information about your academic requirements? How much of the information do you read? How much do you understand? How likely are you to read morning mail messages? How do you feel about these messages? Of the following, if the Office of Academic Advising were to create Facebook, would you follow? Would you DM? Would you like posts? Would you comment? Would you share? If OAS or Academic Advising were to create Instagram, would you follow? Would you DM? Would you like? Would you comment? Would you share? If advising were to create a Twitter, would you follow? Would you DM? Would you favorite? Would you retweet? If they created Snapchat, would you friend? Would you DM? Would you snap? Would you view stories? Where would you like to see these messages? Select all that apply. Where else would you like to see messages from academic advising? How many times did you meet with your advisor? On average, how long did those meetings last? How many advisors have you had? Why did you switch your advisor? Why do you schedule your meetings? Thinking about your last meeting, how many minutes did you spend talking about these things? How did you feel after you left these meetings? How satisfied were you with these things? So, example, my advisor's effort to build a relationship, prep for a meeting, and so on. How would you rank your relationship with your academic advisor? What can they improve? And then Jedi is my major, class years 2018, because somebody sent it to me. So that's the survey we're looking at. You export this data from Qualtrics to SPSS. You may end up with a data file. It's a .sav file, like I mentioned. This SAV file is available in the Analysis Procedures module, 1130 SimData 2. In order to open SPSS, you might be able to get that information, or you might be able to get the software from the library. They have it on a little flash drive. I don't know that they check it out to students. I know they check it out to faculty. It's a 1-year renewable subscription. Otherwise, it's available on lab computers. Go to the start menu, you type SPSS, hit enter, and it'll run. And I accidentally hit the mail button. We're going to talk about running SPSS from the syntax window, because it's the best way for you to do quality assured procedures for analyzing your data. In order to start a comment, you put an asterisk, Shift 8. This is a comment. Everything must end in a period. You can put lots of spaces here. I suppose they are character terms. I don't know if that's spelled right, but it doesn't matter. The thing I'm going to be using mostly is the paste command. So we start with the file menu, which we're used to. We're going to open data. This data I put on our desktop. There it is. Rather than open data, I'm going to hit paste. When I hit paste, that generates the command to open that data file. Now that blinking thing, that cursor, can go, let's see how to say this. If I want to run this this thing that I've highlighted. It starts as soon as the characters start, so the letter G. It ends with the period. So I can have the cursor there. I can highlight part of it. I can highlight the whole thing. This button right here will run the selection that I've highlighted. Or I can just have the cursor in there and it will only run the, I'll call it a sentence because it's a sentence. It starts with a letter and ends with the period. If I just want to run this sentence, I can put my cursor in there and hit the run button. Or if I want to run, I hit Control R. Notice how it goes light gray until I put the period there. Because the sentence right now starts with this asterisk, so SPSS thinks the whole thing is a comment. Let's get this data. And I'm going to run it Control R. That's the output window. You can tell because it says output. And it has gotten the data. But I haven't asked it to run any analyses or anything yet. So all it's done for me is summoned the data. And here it is. The data, some of this may be a review. Some of this data, sorry, this is the SAV file. It's the data window. There are two views. There's the data view, which sort of looks like Excel. You just have these fields at the top, along with the inputs for those fields. But there's also the variable view. Those are the two things down here, the very bottom. The variable view shows you each variable as a row, along with a number of characteristics. For example, question Q2_1. Or heck, let's start with Q1. Q1, the question is in the label column. And that question is, are you currently an undergraduate student at Providence College? The values that it can take on, if you click this little ... this little ellipsis over here, you get a window that says value labels. 1 equals yes and 2 equals no. That's the rich data which was imported from SPSS, or sorry, from Qualtrics. Qualtrics knows that one means yes and 2 means no, so it imported that. If I wanted to know the frequencies or the counts, I could run the frequencies command. Back in my, where'd you go? Oh. Back in my syntax window, I can say run frequencies on Q1. It is not case sensitive. And Control R in my output window. It now says I have 99. Let's see, can I make this bigger? Not really. Can I zoom? Not really. So there are 99 valid responses to this question, and all 99 of them are yes, which is good, because if someone was not an undergraduate student, I don't really care about what they have to say about advising. The SPSS assignment that you're going to be doing asks you to execute a number of different commands. I tried to give you some indication as to how you can navigate there using the menus across the top. So this indicates transform. There's things that you can use here to transform. You can do things in here to analyze. And for example, if I actually wanted to generate via point and click that same thing that I just know how to do with the words, I can come to analyze, and there's a whole bunch of analysis bits here. You can get descriptive statistics, you can get correlations, you can get regressions. If you wanted to transform things, you could recode missing values, you could recode values into the same variables. just in case you might need to see these in the future. It's where they're available. But if we wanted to do descriptive statistics, for example, frequencies on Q1, we click frequencies, scroll down to Q1, click this arrow, which puts it into which variables we're including. This menu stuff over here, if I hit statistics, I can tell it what statistics I want. Although for this variable, I don't know, these things don't really mean anything because it's a constant, so it's not really a variable. But regardless, whatever I decide to tell SPSS I want to do, rather than hit OK to just generate some output, I hit paste. And somewhere down here, because I hit a bunch of returns here, after I hit paste, it says, run the frequencies command on the variables Q1. I specified when I was clicking that I wanted the mean and the standard deviation and apparently the median. I said that I wanted to create a histogram, and the order that it puts these things in, because I could run frequencies on a number of different variables, is based on the analysis, is the I don't know, default order, the order that I clicked them into that box. Hasn't generated any output. This is still the same output that happened when I ran the command here. I know that because right here where it says frequencies Q1, very small, I can't really even see. But that's what I typed, that's what I ran, so that's what this executed. When I run this piece, run, in my log, it shows me exactly what, can I make you any bigger? It shows me what command I executed and then generates all this output based on that command. So for me, in your SPSS project and for the analysis you do for your semester projects, it's nice to have the syntax so I know what you did. If I have your data in your syntax, I know how you generated your output. I can generate, presumably, the same output which you generated. And if you generate things and you don't know why it's not working, rather than just showing me your data and your output, I can literally see what you executed and figure out whether or not that's generating what you believe it should generate. Something a little bit more interesting might be, let's take a look at some of these other variables. Please indicate the offices which you have used while you're here. Now, SPSS converted that question, which, if we look at it again, yes, I agree. Yes, I'm an undergrad. This is Q2 in the questionnaire. And it's going to separate each one of these 5 options into its own nominal variable. So Q2 actually separates into Q2, let's call it sub 1, sub 2, sub 3, sub 4, sub 5. And if I wanted to see the frequencies for those, I could do the same thing I did here. Show you some shortcuts now. FRE is the abbreviation for frequencies command. So I can say FRE, and then it will do it automatically, or I can just type FRE. SPSS doesn't let you Control-C copy, so you got to right-click copy, hence the need for bringing the mouse, 30-30 mouse. It will allow me to paste here. Starts with a letter, ends with a period, and now it can run the frequency command on these 5 variables. Cursor anywhere in this, call it a sentence, hit the run or Control-R, and then it generates frequencies for these 5 variables. 59 people said they use OAS. 47 people said they use academic advising. 57 people said they use CCEPD. 48 people said they use personal counseling, and 31 said they went to campus ministry. So I can generate frequencies and determine how many people use the following offices. And it also generates some other outputs, variable by variable. By the way, I'm sorry for any of the obscure noises I'm making. There's a lot of liquid in here today. It's gross. Sorry. But there's lots of different ways that this output gets generated. It will generate one that summarizes the variables that you've included. And this can be useful for generating things like bar charts, or you can, if these are things that you want, you can separate them all individually in here. So these are just some fundamentals of how I'll be working in SPSS. There's commands, they look like sentences. They start with words if I want comments to explain what I'm doing, or perhaps if I want to say, I'm now working on task 3. This is what I'm doing. Start with asterisks, end with periods. It goes great because it's a comment, because it just illustrates the things that I'm trying to do. Questions, comments, thoughts so far? Pace check. Too slow, just right, too fast. What are we looking for here? So there's one bit of analysis that I'm going to demonstrate, actually a couple, but then I want to see, because we do have a bit of time here, this team, if there were certain analyses that when we talked about this last week and I set up, what are some things you want to describe, what are some things you want to compare, what are some things you want to relate, I want to be able to let you guide those questions, because this is the project you've been working on, and then if teams want to talk about, you can come in, set up some time to meet, say these are some things that I want to analyze. We can sit down and walk through how you can generate your own syntax. I don't think I can do all of it for you, but for a lot of this analysis, being efficient is being able to do something once and then copy, replace, so you can do it again and again. If you want to do a bunch of comparisons, a bunch of histograms, a bunch of frequencies, write the command once and then swap out the variables as you need them. So if you have a bunch of things that you want to compare, we can do that. One analysis I want to show you that is that you need to know. We mentioned before, if you want to do group comparisons, different ways that we can do group comparisons. We can do independent samples, independent samples, t-tests. Comparing two groups to that group. Control to a manipulation. Seniors to not seniors. But you're basically comparing two groups. You can do, and all of these, by the way, are talking about comparing means. That's an independent samples t-test. T-test is probably like the t-test, the first t-test you may have learned back in stats class. So a one sample t-test is comparing a sample mean to an expected value, otherwise known as a population parameter. For example, I expect 15 people to be here over the course of 16 classes. I observed 14 people in here. I have a sample mean. I have an expected value. I want to compare the sample mean to the expected value. That would be a one sample t-test. But in the event that I have a categorical independent variable with more than one level, for example, class year, we actually have that in our data down here at Q33, I think. What is your class year? Q33. 1, 2, 3, 4 is indicated by these value labels. Let's just take a look at what those are real quick. Free Q33. Copy with the dirty mouse. Paste it into Excel. Zoom in. Should have created a macro. Now we can see here. Oh, what was it? Alt HBO. Merge. Unmerge. Here. We can see that of the 99 people who responded, there are freshmen, 23 sophomores, 26 juniors, and 30 seniors. Highlight this stuff and this stuff only. Hit F11. Creates a bar chart. I don't want that. I want a pie chart. And then now suddenly I have a pie chart. Could probably use some data labels. Probably use some legend. Legend could probably be bigger. And now I have a sense of this big yellow piece is the big yellow piece. And I was able to, right quick, using just a handful of keystrokes, generate a pie chart describing my data, showing what proportion of people were represented from these groups. With a categorical independent variable, and a, let's call it, continuous dependent variable, where continuous is like interval or ratio level, or in some cases, ordinal. For example, how satisfied are you with regards to the following? My advisor's effort to build a personal relationship, my advisor's knowledge and core requirements, my advisor's preparation for meeting, and so on. These questions were measured with a 5-point satisfaction scale. And that looks like it's Q27, and there were 6 different questions here. Let's go ahead and take a look at what those are. By generating frequencies for those variables, put a period at the end. When there's no period, it's red, bad, I guess. Period, blue, good. And then run this. And now I can see that I have 99 valid responses for each. And I get frequency tables for each of these. And they look like this. 13 people were extremely satisfied. 16 people were somewhat dissatisfied. 26 were neither. 21 were somewhat. 23 were extremely. And this is our satisfaction. Highlight this stuff. Hit F11. Remove the gap width. And boom, we've got something that looks like a histogram with extremely dissatisfied on one side and extremely satisfied on the other. It's not really normal. I mean, it's randomly generated data, presumably around a mean of 3. I don't have those means or any descriptive statistics here, but if I wanted those descriptive statistics, I could say analyze descriptive statistics and give me some descriptives. For example, Q26, hold shift. No, we're on 27. Click over. Now these are the variables that I'm choosing. Options, give me the mean, standard deviation. Yeah, this looks good. And then I paste. And now the descriptive statistics. Descriptives for these variables and the statistics I'm provided are the mean, the standard deviation, the minimum, and the maximum. The cursor's in here, so I hit run. And now it provides me these descriptive statistics. Descriptives, the log is right here. It ran this set of commands. That's what I get for trying to use keyboard shortcuts. Thanks, SPSS. That command generated this table. Minimum was 1, the maximum was 5, and the mean was 3.25. Mean is 3.29. Mean is 3.04, 2.8, 2.8, 3. So I want descriptive statistics, I can generate them that way. I generated a histogram using Excel, but I could also do one using the frequencies command, statistics, I need the charts. Charts, give me a histogram. Paste. Oh no, I said frequencies for Q1. Copy these variables because those are the ones I'm interested in. Paste them here. Bob's your uncle. And now I've got histograms. That looks just like the one we created in Excel. But with I don't need these frequencies anymore. Comment you out. With a categorical independent variable with more than 2 levels. Class year. You may see sometimes K to indicate the number of categories. Different people use different nomenclature. That's the last version of it that stuck in my brain from 2006. So that's generally how I refer to it. Other people may tell you that classes need to be represented this way. I don't know, but we've got 4 of them. You may be asked to generate a mean comparison called a one-way ANOVA, where you have a factor, and that factor is, for us, Q33. And the dependent list, the thing I want to compare, that Q27 we were just looking at. I mentioned before that in order to do some of these comparisons with an ANOVA, you also have to include these things called post hoc or after the fact tests. I'm not going to include them right now. Options though, getting descriptive statistics and a means plot. These are pretty recommended, straightforward things to include whenever you look at an ANOVA, because this is comparing means for these 4 different groups. These variables we looked at, for example, how satisfied are you with my advisor's support of my goals, my advisor's encouragement to continue contact, my advisor's connections for career opportunities, preparation for the meeting, knowledge and core requirements, and so on. Different class years may have different satisfaction. This Way Anova will compare each of those 4 class years to one another. The command looks like this. Rather than call it ANOVA, it's called One Way. It begins with the things you're comparing by which group. Q33 is that variable we identified as class year. To say Q33, class year. Q27, satisfaction with advisor. Run this command. Generates a bunch of output. Actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of the output, run it again, gives me a brand new output which only contains this thing that I ran. So you can generate, and this is actually when I run analysis, I'll often just close and get rid of the output window. Once I've seen that it generates something that I want, I have what I want, and that's the command. I have the instructions. As long as I have the instructions, I can generate the output whenever I want it. Boy, that looks like a lot of stuff. What you're really after, thing in the menu that says ANOVA. So I'm going to copy and paste into Excel for easier inspection. So right here, this is one mean comparison for this particular question, which is how satisfied are you with my advisor's effort to build a personal relationship? The analysis of variance compares means for satisfaction on advisor's effort to build relationship by looking at the means for each of those 4 groups, the variance for each one of those groups. It's called the analysis of variance, so it looks at their variance. Does something that's between groups and within groups, because between groups we have 4 groups. Degrees of freedom is 3. You may remember something such as n-1 in the past. Same thing applies here. 99 people, minus 3 groups, minus 1 for within groups, degrees of freedom. We're doing 1 or subtracting something else. Just the way when we calculated degrees of freedom back in statistics, may have been n-1, may have been n-2. Well, it depends on the number of groups you have, depends on the sample size you have. But all of these numbers for degrees of freedom are roughly how many groups you have and how many people you have. The more groups, the less degrees of freedom, and so on. Rather than calculating a T statistic, the ANOVA is sometimes called an F test. And just like if we did a Z test or a T test or a correlation or anything like that, there's a p-value or a significance value associated here. Alt H B O. Oh no, that's the border. It was Alt H M C. That's what I'm after. HMC, not HBO. HBO underlines. There's a p-value here, otherwise known as your significance. You know one thing? It's that you're looking for p-values. That's the thing that you take away from statistics classes. P-values less than 0.05 indicate quote-unquote statistical significance. It means your relationship has evidence to be real. It means your difference has evidence that it's real, the evidence being a sufficient sample size, and so on. But none of these significance values are anywhere close to 0.05, which means none of these variables appear to differ between class years. In other words, the average satisfaction with advisors' knowledge of core requirements does not vary whether you're talking about a senior, a junior, a sophomore, or a freshman. It's all the same. We can know that by looking at the means plots. Now this one, well, it looks like it's a little different, but the scaling on the side here, just so I can show you, runs from the top up here of 3.35 to the bottom down here of 3.15. On a 5-point scale, at most a 3.35, at least a 3.15, those aren't significant differences. One of these, however, has a p-value that's almost 0.05. So our sample size isn't very big, and this goes back to Rachel's question about what's the sufficient sample size. Here, I've only got groups of about 20 to 30 per class year. It can be hard to detect a real difference simply because you don't have enough evidence, statistical power, sample size. All of those are roughly equivalent. The more observations you have, the more evidence you have to support your conclusion. If you had a larger sample size, you might be able to more definitely justify the conclusion. But for now, this p-value, which is almost 0.05, is something that we might call marginally significant, which means one of these groups might be different from another one of these groups. On the question, my advisor's encouragement to continue contact. Let's take a look at what was generated for that particular variable. It's this one right here. Where this maximum for the class year of 2018 seniors is a 3.25. Slightly above neutral. It's somewhat satisfied. Whereas 2021 first year students, they're at 2.25, which is somewhat dissatisfied. We don't have the post hoc test to indicate which group is different from which, but we can see freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors, that those four groups have almost a linear relationship. As you get older, you become more satisfied with your advisor's encouragement to continue contact. Freshman advisors, apparently, this is all simulated data. I didn't generate this. None of this was intentional. It's just playing around with the data until I found something to talk about. You may find this as well. I don't know. But as it were, this was the one which had some significance in terms of, or marginally significant ANOVA output to suggest that this might be an effect. I point this out because based on what I think we might get for sample sizes, it may be in your best interest not to hard target 0.05 as a significance cutoff, though less than 0.1 for a p-value, which this is less than 0.1. Is something that we might call marginally significant. meaning that it's worth investigating, or if we had more data, this is something that we might consider to be a real effect. How you might see this in the future. You may see a table that looks like this, where you have between groups variance and within groups variance. And this will say p-value or significance. This is the F value, degrees of freedom, sum of squares. That's between groups variance, sum of squares. Your focus is right here. The p-value associated with that f-test. If that p-value is less than 0.05, close to 0.05, and so on, that's indicative that this test shows you that these groups have some sort of difference. I hope you get why I'm trying to capture this, because if your brain is buzzing or some part of that, you kept up with me for like 25 minutes and then kind of lost you. You may want to be doing this in the future, but you have this opportunity to revisit. That's why I wanted to try to capture this, so you have this resource available to you. But I think you can expect to see something like this. You may be asked questions. Tell me, what are things that you might be interested in investigating based on the questions that you know you've asked? Or do you have questions, or anybody have questions? Do you need a minute? Do you want to talk to each other? What's going on?
Can you regroup for 1 minute?
Yeah, take a minute. Take a minute, talk to people. Are there things that you've been doing that look at all like what we've been asking that you want to investigate? How you do group comparisons, how you do any of that stuff? Like, take a look, take a minute. We still got a few minutes here where I can show you anything you want to know. Take a look at the assignment, or I don't know. Let's see if I got names for it here. On. No? Oh, it's a stupid office.
For the museum. Oh, there's several there.
It's not better than
Yeah, just something around the shoulder.
Can we discuss it?
Talking about Andrew and Katie.
Yeah.
So
We don't want to bug them until after Minnesota.
Andrew sent me an email Tuesday or Wednesday. I can forward you so I get you looped in on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, let me do that because he is talking about launching sometime soon. I just want to make sure because I also included because the Todd from the IRB said because it could be quote unquote a program evaluation, and I sort of hit him with like here's 7 different studies. He may approve it piecemeal, and I specifically pointed out in the application that commented on that it's been approved by Andrew that we're going to sample based on how he wants to recruit. So that would just be what are your questions there?
We just wanted to meet with them before we launch, be like, since they're the ones sending it out, just kind of touch base and get like finalize on that, and then see like a graph of people like that.
Yeah. Do you know how at the basketball games they have like couch type things, floor seats that they give away tickets for, or raffle for?
Sounds familiar.
They have like the big, like, it's basically like a massage chair kind of thing. Like, it's like the big giant chairs.
You see them when you walk in. Yeah, it's open.
Oh, I'm usually in the press box.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm saying that, like, everybody who took the survey would have their name put in. If their name was like randomly selected, then they get to take those seats.
Yeah, if I wanted, basically,
That would incentivize
Yeah, so the incentivization,
That's something they can do with that,
So I'm like.
yeah, I'm not sure exactly how that plays into regular, because again, there's incentivization, and that means you have to capture someone's identity. And as soon as you capture any identifying characteristics, it changes the review procedure from being exempt to something has to look at it in more detail, which delays.
But if they can choose
That still sort of puts you in the same spot. Now, maybe if Katie has a mechanism in her email correspondence that allows people to say, by clicking on this link, you get entered. Or by taking the survey, you get entered. And it's sort of like single sign-on, I need to recognize whether or not somebody clicked on the link, but it doesn't require them to complete the survey, though it's sort of implied that by clicking on this link, you will complete the survey. And there's some disconnect there. But in terms of the formal ethical procedures in order to, and I love the idea, like I don't want you to because I always forget that. I like the idea. I love unique incentivization. Like people want to be entered in this stuff. And it's so low cost, and they want to collect good data, and I'm sure they'd be all for it.
I think that's a no cost thing.
It totally is no
the
cost.
seats they have there, so they wouldn't.
Maybe if this goes to a next level of they collect this data and then they want to do it again in March, because that's another thing that came out of the research we did a few years ago, was that they want to stay in contact. For a while they stopped, like after one of the Big East, 3 or 4 years ago, they didn't follow up with anybody, and we were like, why not? Your team just won, that's when you should be selling stuff. And they're like, oh, okay. So it may be the thing where they want to back on people, and then we can get more incentivization there, or it may be more encouraged there.
But you're thinking for right now, we should stay away from that.
Has to, in order to stay.
Got it.
All right, we can talk more about this in just a second.
And you'll forward us that email?
Yeah. So you can send me a reminder real quick, and I'll never forward it to you. Sometimes I forget things. So Apple Time 1241, team or teams, anything that looks at all like maybe what you're doing or a question you might want to investigate, something like, can show you, Rachel, what's up?
Yeah, could we look at first question, seeing if someone that selected that they follow or use Facebook for one or more of the 2 offices that we gave questions for, if they would also be interested in following Facebook for advising.
Okay. So let's take a look at your data here. What's great here is that I can come here and we have, this is fun. This is which of the following things do you follow? So this is follow for, is it any of these for Facebook, or what are we looking at? Oh, no, this is great because we'll be able to I'll just show you commands.
Okay, so if generally you said that yes, you follow Facebook. So the question for it was like, if you said that yes, I follow Facebook for OAS, could we compare that to someone? Compare that to responses for Facebook for advice.
All right. So we want anything to do with Facebook. Would be something like Q42. Because Q42 is Facebook for OAS, right? Mm-hmm. Facebook OAS. How often do you check? Is this Facebook for CCEPD, right? I believe that's going to be 6. Yep. So Q62 is Facebook CC, Center for Career Education and Professional Development. It was just those two, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what we want to do is basically compute a value which we could call any Facebook. Now I'm starting by setting the value for every person to be 0. If any one, this is just the, let's see. No, we'll do it this way. If Q for 2 equals 1, or Q6 2 equals 1, that is, they selected in Q42, which was Facebook OAS, Q62, Facebook CCEPD. If either of those is equal to 1, then their any Facebook equals 1. It could be either, it could be both, but everybody starts, we're creating a new variable called any Facebook, and if they've followed it on this one or this one, then they get a 1. Any, it's not case sensitive, free, any Facebook. Run those 3, and now we get something that says any Facebook. I know our time is up. So if you need to sneak out, feel free. Thanks for sticking around. If you got more questions, stick around. But across those 2 variables, 68 people said either one or the other. Now I can verify this by running a crosstab. Crosstab Q42 by any Facebook. We can see here. Yep. No, because you can copy paste. Hold on, dude. I'm trying to get this explanation. So this shows me that the people who are in the any Facebook, no one that didn't say this wasn't in the any Facebook. To make sure that this command worked correctly.
So when you made it Q4, like those, the question or question 6, any equals any Facebook, or like, are you saying like, is that language saying that if you answer that you follow Facebook on question 4 or question 6, that means that you are part of the group or whatever, any Facebook equals 1? Like, I'm confused what, like, how do we get to where we analyze like the actual question that says if you if advising would make a Facebook? That, like, are you saying that that answer should be one? Like, I'm confused.
No, all I've done right now is classify everybody in your data set based on those 2 questions, which was Facebook for OAS or Facebook for Career Ed. I said, if you said you, what were those 2 questions for Q4?
So that's what we follow for.
That's if you already followed them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this, anybody who has a 1 that I created follows Facebook for either or both OAS or Slate 108.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
And so now I got this sense. And so rather than just say, if you have a 1 for this variable, all I know is that you follow Facebook for OAS, but I don't know anything about your Slate 108.
Right.
If I know it's 1 here, I don't know anything about your OAS. But this variable that I've created says it's either one of those.
Yeah.
But now that I have that classification, I know that they follow Facebook for one of those. What was the next step you wanted to do for the analysis?
Figure out.
See if they would follow Facebook for.
Okay, and then what question was that?
How like
So
you're
is
gonna
it-
follow? Yeah.
Is it possible to see like if they selected both? Like, because the way that you did it was one or the other, right? So like, could we You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to see like
Yep.
they follow.
Compute.
It's okay.
No. Facebook following. All right. Equals 0. I'll say, actually, we can call this equals the sum of Q4 2, Q6 2. And I always do this first just to assign everybody a value of 0. And then everybody gets a 0 when I run this command. And then depending on whether they follow one or both of those, I'll get a sum. So they'll either be 0, 1, or 2. 0 if they follow neither, 1 if they follow only one, 2 if they follow both. What did I spell wrong? Well, I'm going to figure out why I don't have a 0 for the system missing, but that just replaced system missing. But this does tell us how many they follow. We can see before that we had 68, or 68 was, 68 people had any Facebook. And of those 68, 42 followed only one, 26 followed 2. Everybody who is system missing followed neither.
So how do we know of the 26 that followed both, who would be likely to follow?
So now we go to maybe we would say analyze, compare means, independent samples t-test for any Facebook is the grouping variable. 0, 1. This is my any Facebook. This is not the total sum yet. And then whatever the test variable would be. So I'm not sure where that was. Doesn't matter because I'm just going to paste it here. Would be this, but now what variable did we want to compare it on?
It's yep. Oh, you missed it. A little bit higher. Yep.
How likely would you be to follow?
So yeah, 59.
So all of these. Copy.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Place this. Paste. Run. And now we've got comparisons for all of those. 68 versus 31. T-test, we look for significance. No significant differences here. But that's how you would do it.
Okay.
So we can see, I'll copy this. Terry, come in if you want. Don't follow any, do follow some. Their average likelihood is 4.7, their average likelihood is 5.4. The t-test is what gave us the significance. We saw that none of the p-values were less than 0.05. But at the very least, we can see that's the average likelihood for liking posts. This is the average likelihood for follow, so on. But it's effectively defining those two groups like this or like this. Something like this would be good.
Yeah.
And then say,
Yeah.
let's compare 0s to 1s on these dependent variables.
Would we have to do something this in depth on the lab or the SPSS assignment?
That's basically what you're asked us to do.
Okay.
You consider this in depth.
Yes.
Okay? Okay.
Just because, I don't know, I feel like without having necessarily like groundwork training on all the different functions, it's like figuring out which function to use and then kind of trickles out.
I got you. So you're going to be in analyze, and anytime you're doing a mean comparison, and for each one of the tasks, it tells you you're going to be doing either a one sample t-test, an independent samples t-test, or an ANOVA. Paste it, and then it just says these are your dependent variables. That's your independent variable. If you're doing a one sample t-test, that's your expected value. And you know, what is your, we're comparing something like these variables we were looking at before. We want to know whether any one of these is significantly different from 5.
What is 5?
I don't know, arbitrary number I picked.
But what would that number be based on?
It's given to you
Okay.
in the assignment. Take a look at the assignment and let me know whether or not that's confusing.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, yeah. Alana, Matt, sorry, I know you got questions. I know you probably got to run with your questions. What's up?